A few years ago, I did a video on wiring up a dash cam in the Golf 6. Sharp-eyed viewers might see this is actually a different camera. It's a Viofo A129. Anyway, they're similar, and this one uses the Hardwire kit from Viofo, which manages the camera's parking mode, and it has a battery saver built into the little box there. Basically, that just terminates into power, switched ignition, and ground cables. You can see how I've fuse tapped that up in here. Now, I only did a front camera install in that video before though, so I'm calling this one part 2 because I'm adding a rear cam since this camera supports one. Well, here I've just temporarily plugged the rear camera in just to have a think about where I actually want the camera to be located. Normally I would put it down on the rear windscreen glass like this, but the design of these cameras, although it has a nice low profile wedge shape, which works nicely on a sloping back glass like a sedan or coupe, actually it takes up quite a bit of space when it has to be more vertical, like on the Golf hatch, and the way that the cable connects in the top doesn't help either. Now, if you sit in the driver's seat and look through the rear vision mirror, you can get an idea if it'll be in the way or not. From experimenting, that was going to be down in the second band, so to say, of the demister wires, which I wasn't very happy with. On the other hand, if you look above the glass there, you can see that the farther you bring the camera back into the cabin, the higher and the more out of the way it will be. You could do other things like stick it, way over one side or the other. But then it wouldn't be in the sector of the glass that's wiped by the windscreen wiper, and it probably wouldn't be pointing directly backward either. It could go on this black bit of the plastic trim above the glass on the hatch, but the way that this trim is designed, the cable can't come out the top and run directly to it because that interacts directly with the weather seal. It would have to poke out the bottom by the glass and then snake around and do a big dog leg. It would be a bit messy. If you did do that, it would work, but you would have to route the cable through the flexible rubber hose. That's no problem, but a bit of extra work. And then you would go forward from there, much as I'm going to show you here. So I decided to keep the camera as far high as possible, and also do the neatest job with the cable, as you'll see. And that meant working with this white trim at the cabin side and just not worrying about the hatch bit at all. So this trim is held in place with metal clips that Volkswagen likes to use. Better than plastic, I suppose, but they're very strong. And if they haven't been taken off before, they can be a bit tough. What happened here is that most of them let go at their base so that the metal clip remained in the bodywork. The clips pulled out of the plastic. So I had to pull them out one by one with a tool and reattach them to the plastic. And with that trim out of the way, I could see up into the headliner space. My idea was to get a cable through there to the front. A lot of rear dash cam installs will route the cable along the side of the car, often at the bottom actually, down and then up at both ends. Or you can go along the side of the headliner, but that's a bit iffy on modern cars with side curtain airbags. You would need to make sure that you don't run the cable across in front of an airbag so as to interfere with its deployment. What I wanted to do is what I've done on other cars and just take the most direct route straight down the middle of the roof. What I'm doing here is just taking out the front courtesy light assembly. You pull down the little grill bit here, then you have access to these two Torx screws. With those removed, the light will come away and you can unplug it. Now that gives you already basic access to the space above, but you might want a bit more. So the surround or bracket will come down too. There are more screws behind the sunglass holder. This is quite hard to remove, but there are two clips which you can action with a screwdriver at the top. And with the holder out of the way, the 4 black corner screws need removing, and then you just pull on the plastic. And yeah, the gear knob's a great place to place it. Okay, in the space above, you might think you can just start sticking cables up there, but nothing's so easy on a Volkswagen. You can see that the path is blocked by this foam padding. You can, however, get around to the side of it, and destination number 1 will be the center courtesy light, which helpfully will give me another manhole to access the roof space. That pulls down quite easily. And notice I'm using these plastic trim tools where I can, by the way. They're great because they are much less likely to damage the plastic. And this is how you access these bulbs, but you can go a few steps further. There are clips at the rear side which hold this surround into the headliner, and then the whole thing will drop down. You can unplug the light, and then there's this black plastic topping shell, which itself is held in location with some clips at the rear side, which can be released. Now don't lose the black plastic up in the attic. It's enough just to make some space that you can poke through. And what I have here is this length of aluminium wire. It's great stuff because it's soft and it's easy to bend. But it's stiff enough to poke through places like this. And I've also filed down the ends so that they're not sharp enough to damage anything anyway. And I found that I could poke it all the way through, and if I got the right angle, it finds itself coming out next to that foam block, and then I could reach a hand in and pull it through. Then I attached the rear camera cable to it, and carefully pulled it back through, dragging the cable with it. And I've also put tape on the end of the cable, not so much to hold the cable, the wire wrapped around it does that, but it's more just to sort of smooth it out so that you've got this sort of triangular shape, so it doesn't snag up on anything and get hung up. Right, then at this stage, obviously the second destination is the rear. That bit was quite easy. There doesn't seem to be anything much more in the way. I just had to reach up in there and drag it out. Back in the center, I just pushed the cable out to the side, opposite the light wiring, so the right-hand side of the car, just so it was out of the way. And at the rear, I pulled through enough cable just to work with at the rear end. And then at the front, I coiled up all the excess cable, which is quite a lot, considering I haven't actually used much of its length. And there is sufficient space off to the side of the courtesy light area to store this little coil perfectly well. At the other end, that's to say the front end of the cable, needs to go to the front camera. And I used the aluminium wire again to push that through the headliner and out next to the camera at the glass. This is slightly tricky as there's much less space and there is a lot of other wiring and cabling around here. So one must be careful not to go traumatizing anything delicate. You also need to be aware of the light itself, the dome light, which has to go back into the space that you're working in. Just make sure you don't block anything that needs to go back up in there. So I pulled the excess cable back through once the camera was connected and mounted back up so that I knew where everything needed to go. Then I was at the point where bits of the car could start going back in. The surround first, it just snaps up, and the 4 corner screws need to go back in. Make sure all the wiring is where you want it as you put this in. The center top cover I put back in place too, put it back on its clips. Nothing more to do here with the cable, so the light could go back in too. It just hooks in at the front and then pushes upward at its clips at the rear. If you want to change the bulbs, now's a good time, of course. And the lens fascia goes back in the same way. Check that there's nothing inside the lens. Mine had something in it. Had to knock that out. Give it a clean. And as you do this, check that the lights and the buttons are all working. Just make sure that you haven't messed up the wiring somehow. Right, so at the back, the camera cable is going to have to poke out where this trim meets the headliner, and that's a join which overlaps back to front, so to say. It means that the cable has to run back to front and then do a hook around, do a 180 to meet the camera. No big deal, but I needed to just allow enough slack in it to do that. You need to make sure that the cable doesn't get hooked up on the clips as you put them back in. All these are tabs in the headliner fabric, and it needs to route around in such a way that it will sit happily, with no kinks or hard bends in it, just as it wants to, meet the camera where you've put it. So the trim just pushes back into its clips. It does require a bit of force to jam those metal clips back in there, but it will hold the cable at its overlap joint once it's in place. It's probably a good idea at this stage to turn on the camera and check that the rear cam is actually working okay, and you cross your fingers that the cable hasn't been abused too much in the process of forcing it through all these tight spots. And the other thing I did was the Viofo cameras let you use a phone with Wi-Fi to connect to the camera to get a live view, and this is quite helpful in aiming the camera because you can see what it's looking at. You can get it exactly central. I also didn't use the Viofo removable mount that it comes with because I wanted it out of the way as much as possible, and that would just add a few more millimeters of blocking the view. So I just got some double-sided tape and I stuck it directly on the liner like this. And as I suggested, it's worth taking your time to just make sure it's pointing in the right direction. So there it is. That's about as unobtrusive as you can get on this car, I think. It's pretty well out of the way and it's protected. Also, when the boot's shut, it's quite hard to see it. It's quite hard to see that it's there, which is maybe nice. And back to the front, the sunglass holder just snaps back in. Although I'd found that the clips still needed some more assistance with the screwdriver here. They're really quite hard to work. And then I put the dome light back in. This car has a microphone for its head unit, which is just sort of floating about up here. Somebody else has put it there in the past. It should sit on top of the grille, which has some little holes in it, because that's where the microphone's supposed to go. Then, of course, test that the lights are working okay again. And do those screws up tight, and then the grille flap will just snap back in place. And then it's all finished. Okay, so the camera, as I installed it, will always point in the right direction. It won't point at the sky when the boot's open, which is one advantage to putting it in the cabin, as I have. When the boot's closed, you do see a bit of the trim in the frame, at the top especially. And you can also see the demister wires because you're just pulled a little bit back further than usual. But really, that's fine. You can see the full view side to side, which is what matters from the point of view of seeing other traffic. You can see everything of relevance perfectly clearly. I think there's only an issue here if you were to get rear-ended by an aircraft. Okay, that's it. Hope that was helpful. Have fun.